Hello, LinkedIn. Welcome to another LinkedIn live session. I am so thrilled to be talking to Ryan Bars from IBM. Oh, that's a bit Ryan Humphreys in the background. That's a bit new. Sorry, and that. So, hello, Ryan. Sorry, I was a bit shocked by that. Every time we do these, Ryan always adds something else in, like sound effects or something. But yeah, so Ryan Bars from IBM. Global social influencer marketing lead for IBM. I am so excited for this chat because Ryan, I've got to give a shout out to Analytica event last week in London. Ryan did a chat there about influencer activation and how you encourage more employees to be influencers. And I knew we had this chat set up, Ryan, so very much looking forward to it. So yeah, welcome. Do you want to give us a bit of an overview of what you do?
I appreciate it. I'm glad you found the session and the event useful last week. And it does kind of line up nicely with this conversation. So as Sarah mentioned, Ryan Bars, I lead our global influencer and advocacy programs at IBM, which is everything from strategy and vision down to tactical execution. So I've been doing that for about almost 7 years now, which is kind of wild. And it's great to talk to you again, Sarah. It's been a bit.
Yeah, it has. Yeah, and I actually did tot up the years because you've been at IBM for quite a while, so you've seen quite a lot of changes over the years. And I was quite cute. I'm already going after off the question list, so I bet people in the background are like, "Can you just get back onto it?" But I did think I'm going to ask you that. What have you seen change? Because you've been involved in social for 7 years, a bit in advocacy, employee advocacy, influencer. Now you're an influencer. Have you noticed any sort of adjustments over the years?
Yeah, I mean, today there's just a lot more conversation around the need for influencer marketing and having the proper employee advocacy. I think that was a much harder conversation 7 years ago to have internally around the resources needed to have a successful program. It was a lot of like testing and piloting, and now it's a thing we've proven over the years, and so we need it. We need to invest in it. At least as a marketing mix, I think it's really important. And not like tactically, we've had great partnerships with Analytica and yourself actually to like help us scale, right? Like it's about the not living in spreadsheets so much anymore, not doing the one-off trainings or enablement sessions. It's how do you kind of expand this to a global company, and I think it's really at scale. I've seen the difference too, and just the amount of platforms and services out there to help companies and brands really show up smart.
Right, I'm going to talk to you a bit more about that later, but it's interesting because Chris Kim a couple of weeks ago, he mentioned exactly the same thing because he's done a lot of social in different organizations, and he said, I no longer have to prove that this is a thing that needs to happen. Companies recognize it needs to happen. So anybody joining live, please say hi in the comments and where you're joining from. And if you want to ask Ryan a question, I'm going to ask Ryan lots of questions that we've heard from customers. But if you want to ask him something, this is a good chance to do it because Ryan has a lot of experience in influencer activation, employee advocacy. So now's a good time to try and do that.
Please ask away. Thank you.
Ask all the tricky questions. I want to talk about scale later. So I'm going to ask you, I'm going to get back to the questions, Ryan Humphreys, so you can stop panicking. What are the benefits of activating subject matter experts? Because I know you've done this quite a lot in IBM, really putting your experts in front of the logo. So what benefits have you seen from doing that at IBM?
I think there's benefits on both sides, from the brand side and the personal side, right? As a IBMer or the employee, they're building that persona online. You are showing up as a subject matter expert. You are communicating, engaging with like-minded individuals, hopefully. I think that's really big benefit to individual. And then I think there's the benefit to the brand where we know people buy from people. And it is really about humanizing some of the things, and especially in the tech industry, where some of this stuff is, hidden away or it's intangible to a lot of people. And I think when you, as a brand, can showcase the individuals at times that are creating or innovating on this really interesting stuff, that allows you to sort of cut through some of the noise where people sort of ignore brands and owned accounts a lot of times, and reach is harder to get when it comes from an owned account. So I think employees can really help sort of amplify that message or the narrative that the brand wants to showcase.
Yeah. Now, so I've got to say hi. We've got somebody from Mars. I think that's the company, not the planet. But you might want to. Last I checked, they didn't have Wi-Fi. Good morning from Edmonton, Alberta. Hello, Colin, and Angela is on as well. So just say hi in the comments section. So that is quite interesting what you just said about IT industry, and I want to dig a little bit deeper into that. So technical industries where you have technical employees that potentially, is it true that it's hard to get technical employees on social?
Is it true? I think there is some enthusiasm for people to be on social. I think that they can understand the value that it has, not only for their personal brand, but the brand itself. However, I think that's really met quickly with the realities of social and how much of a investment it is from the person to be really good at it. It's, in my experience, people are really jazzed to help the company. They're jazzed to be on social, to talk about the things that they're really kind of excited about. But when sometimes they realize, okay, this takes consistency, this takes a habit, this takes it sometimes kind of like fade. The enthusiasm sort of fades a little bit. And but back to my earlier point, like I think it's really important for individuals that are creating the technology and building the things that they are showcased and they be able to tell their story. So, and sometimes it's hard to tell that on social because it can be pretty complex, and it can be, and we all know scrolling through the feed, you're trying to stop the scroll, and you have to catch someone's attention in milliseconds, and that sometimes can be hard when you're trying to explain a really complex piece of technology or solution. So you have to be really creative, and then sometimes that's not always the side of the brain that maybe the IT professionals are leveraging. So a lot of them are creative in a lot in their unique ways, but there is a little bit of a barrier there to entry for some of our IT pros.
So how do you do that then, Ryan? Because that's quite interesting, because it feels there is a creative side, but actually I guess it's finding what creativity sits better with them. Is it podcasting, audio, video? So how can you walk me through like how you encourage them to take those steps? How do you get them moving in that direction?
I think it's starting small. So I don't think, we definitely do not advocate for a subject matter expert or SME. I'll probably refer to them as SMEs a lot. So SME, I don't expect them to be on every platform and to be an expert on every platform. That is really hard to do. That's our full-time jobs as social practitioners, is to understand the different nuances of the platforms. I don't expect someone this is sort of something they're doing for the brand and they're outside of their day job to know all of that stuff. So I think it's really encouraging them to find the platform or maybe two platforms that they want to be on for their own interests. Like they find themselves there a lot. So LinkedIn's a great starting point. We know most people have a LinkedIn platform or profile, and I think that's an easier sell to talk about thought leadership topics, to engage with peers and the company, outside the company. Whereas, some other platforms can have a lot of noise and a little bit harder to gain some of that traction. So I think it's starting small and giving them the tools they need to be successful. This isn't something that the social team or the marketing team can do for them long term. And if you do, it's not really scalable. So I think it's what are those enablement pieces for these individuals to do, whether that's on demand or if it's through small cohort training that we've done with Tribal Impact several times. I think there's those things setting them up for success. So there's those tools that you need, and hopefully they build habits where it sort of becomes second nature to them to be on social and engage and share their expertise.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I think it's also important to recognize that people start from different places, don't they? And then they move at different paces. So it could be, we always say this at Tribal, it's really about finding where their starting point is and where their comfort zone is, and then just pushing them and nudging them. Sometimes you can scare people off when you say, right, thanks, welcome to the program, want you to do a video.
Right. Yeah, you're 100% right. And I think that is sort of the checklist when they opt in. It's like, do you like to be on video? And a lot of people don't. Do you like to write? Yeah, there are many different ways that someone can create really smart content. Now that it has to perform well on social, so not everything is social first, but we can talk about how you can build your personal brand, or you can get the messaging out that you want out in a smart way on social if it is tied to a webinar or if it's tied to a longer blog. So you're right. You have to start where they're at. And some people are in the 201 class and they're really excited. And then some people are like, I just need to get rid of the egg on Twitter or whatever. And you just got to kind of start where they're at.
Yeah. So good morning from Calgary, Canada. We've got a lot of people from Canada today. So hello, everyone from Canada.
Everybody.
Big shout out.
So
just based on that, how do you find employees that you think might be ready for this program? Do you wait for them to come and go, do you know what, I wouldn't mind doing this?
It's a mixture. I think it kind of depends. So there are, at least the way we look at it, there's sometimes we do some social listening. So we might, as a brand, identify individuals that are active on different platforms based on their follower count, based on their engagement when they talk about topics that we care about at IBM. Mm-hmm. And so if someone is doing that and they meet some criteria, we might reach out to them through a Slack message or an email, or even leadership might reach out and say, hey, we noticed that you're active on social talking about cloud computing, and we think you'd be a great advocate for the brand. Would you be interested in participating? So I think there's a little bit of that. There are also sometimes we might call like a casting call internally and might have leadership put out a message to relevant groups saying, hey, we have a new initiative within marketing and communications. Raise your hand if you're interested in participating. And then we also do some, the way we're aligned within marketing is, to our different campaigns. And within those campaigns, they have sort of a Rolodex of, I'm aging myself there, Rolodex of people, SME, subject matter experts, that are really tied to the product or the campaign. So that might be a little bit easier way in saying, hey, we would love for 5, 10, whatever of you individuals to be active on social to talk about data, for example. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag, I guess, in how we attract them. So it's very rarely do we have people sort of knocking on our door saying, I want to be active on social. I mean, they might see an SME or a high profile employee on social, and they might say, they might be inspired by that. But most cases, it's really sort of organized by the marketing teams to sort of set the strategy and to say, like, one-offs here and there maybe are okay, but for the most part, we want to sort of build a group that can kind of scale and go through the training that is important to them, to their point about where they're at in their life cycle of social and their comfortability. It's sort of, if you're a 101, you can start here, 201, you start here, but at the most part, we have to have a sort of a starting point for us to sort of capture that interest by them raising their hands.
So that really resonates from what you and Nada were saying last week, actually, at the event, at the Analytica event, which is you're very, at IBM, you are very committed to building a sustainable, scalable program. This is not a one-hit, one-off, you're looking at this holistically, aren't you? And you're building this for long-term success, not for, this campaign, that campaign. You're thinking a bit more holistically about it.
It's a big investment in our people. And I think it's really important that as a team, we prioritize the growth of the individuals, of the programs, and it does scale across the business, the geographies. It's not about this one flash in the pan. We have a new announcement, and like, we want these people because it does take time to build up your comfort level on social. It takes time to build an audience, and these things take time. And it's not something that you can just flip a switch and say, okay, now we have all these really great ambassadors of the brand going out on social. And And at a company the size of IBM, we can't sort of monitor all of that. So we have to kind of, we want this to be a long-term thing where it's really building habits for our employees to be smart on social and show up in the right way.
Yeah, there was some Shoshana from Intel. They call it Employee Thought Leadership Program. They don't call it Employee Advocacy. So I thought that was quite interesting. But what I love is how you are embedding this into the campaigns. This is integrated into marketing. This is not being dealt with in a silo. This is not the influencer program that's running on the edge of the organization. You're baking this into.
Exactly. We have to be close to the business. And while there's maybe not a strong financial investment in like employee advocacy or employee thought leadership, whatever the term, there is obviously a significant time resource and effort. So while we need to show the business, and that's getting into the campaigns and being integrated across the different disciplines within marketing and even outside of marketing, talking to our sales organ. I think that there's just a lot of ways that we can show up and be really close to the business. And like you're saying, we're not sort of a fringe campaign that's just like doing our own thing often. We're really trying to be one sort of marketing organization, one IBM. And I think it really helps that we're integrated as much as we can to the different priorities of the business.
Super. Before I ask you about how you measure success, I would love to tap into how you connect your employees, your SMEs, your SMEs, your subject matter experts, for anyone joining a bit later, to external influencers, because I think IBM's quite mature and sophisticated in the way that you do this. I love how you focus on building relationships. Can you talk a little bit about how that works, please?
Yeah, we know through survey results from Analytica and other industry brands within influencer marketing that a big priority or a big interest to B2B influencers or thought leaders or that they love engaging and networking with like-minded individuals. And of course that brings in the SME, the SME into the picture. So while we want to invest time in that SME showing up on social in the right way, having the right practices and the best practices when it comes to platforms and profile optimization, that's great for them. And then now we want them to sort of expand their audience and their reach. And that's where the influencer, the external partner comes in, because they're chosen a lot of times for their topical authority. They're chosen for who's in their network. And when they talk about a topic that we care about, that network finds that interesting. So tying that back into with the SME is really, I think it's just a win-win-win for a lot of the different individuals, because the external partners, having that ability to connect with a subject matter expert, the subject matter experts having the opportunity to reach new audiences so that they can build their personal influence and brand. And then the IBM brand sort of comes along with that as the organization behind it that's doing all the really interesting and innovative things within the space. So I think it is challenging at times. I don't want to be this rosy color. There are a lot of challenges getting the SMEs, because there is time investment. This is not their day job. So there is some of those barriers you have to overcome in trying to find the right people. But once they do it, they love it. And more times than not, they're like, I want to do more of that. I love the comp. So I think it is really about the relationship building with the external partner, and it's leveraging our SMEs. Because again, we don't partner with external folks just to us to tell them what to say. That's not a philosophy of ours. It's really about relationship building and their unique point of view. So why not bring another IBM individual who can have that sort of technical conversation or just thought leadership conversation together? Just makes sense to me. And we know sometimes brands people ignore what they're saying. And so we love and really strategically invest in sort of that SME and external partner collaboration.
Yeah, and that reminds me actually, there's a study. So anybody who's watching, and by the way, just pop your questions in the comments. I know there's a bit of a delay, but if you do want to, I've got a ton of questions, right? So I'm good, but if you want to ask some questions, pop them in there, and I can see. There's a thought leadership study from Edelman and LinkedIn, which is absolutely brilliant. And if anybody's listening to the podcast, you really need to have a look at that, because there's some incredible stats in there that say that, C-suite B2B buyers, they expect thought leadership to come from a human tone of voice, from a credible, authentic expert within your business. They want it. They're asking for it. And I think this is why the magic that's happening at IBM is you've recognized this, and this is a long process. You can't switch it and make it happen overnight. You've been working at this for some time, right, Ryan? I think.
Yeah, you're 100% like this is a long game. You can't, and there come with some challenges. People leave organizations, they transfer different. So there you will invest your time into people, and you will get that email that they've taken an opportunity somewhere else, or they've moved teams, or their bandwidth has changed. And so, you have sort of this, it's definitely can be a roller coaster. So it's not something that you, again, flip the switch and, okay, we have all these people and great. It is a long game, and it is about relationship building, and it's about building habits and strategy. And I think that has to be really forefront of people's minds when they're thinking about how do they do this at their company, or they want to get more involved or do different things. It's really an investment in time.
So I'm going to ask about that. I'm going to dig into the challenges, because you said, some people will leave, and you said it's not all rosy. It can be quite challenging. So what are some of the challenges that you're facing? Because I know some of the folks watching this or watching the recording will be like, okay, yeah, sounds great, but what can I expect?
Yes, there are. You got battles, scars, and wounds, and everything. I think there's a couple different things that we run up against in my experience. It is, time is always top of people. So there's, I mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, of enthusiasm is normally really high when people are approached about being on social, or they, are inspired by somebody else within the company potentially. And then they sort of hear okay, we got to do a profile optimization. We got to help find your own content. You got to be able to engage with folks. And you have all these sort of things, and doing this on a consistent basis, whether that's daily, every morning when you're having I think the coffee cup routine, or you,
that's it. Oh.
There it is. So you have these sort of habits you want people to build, and that does take a lot of work. So I think there's a little bit of the barrier of, can I do this and be good at it long term? Then there's sort of that pressure of, am I saying the right or wrong thing on social? There's a lot of hesitancy. So if you can get past all of that, there's a lot of hesitancy that individuals don't want to, social can be a really scary place, and it can be really polarizing for a lot of different reasons. And individuals can be a little hesitant to show up in those spaces where maybe people aren't all that kind. So, and they don't want to say the wrong thing at the wrong time. So there's a little of that hesitancy, and you have to overcome to let them know, like, we don't expect you to talk about the brand really at all that much. Talk about what you're passionate about, what you're building, or what's happening, what's trending within the market, what you're seeing and who you're engaging with on social, or what you're reading or listening to. Talk about that. Be authentic. And if you like craft beer, talk about that too. Like, I don't think it all has to be, we don't want this all to be about the brand. And we don't want this, you're not just another marketer for the organization. You are someone who has a lot to say about the things that we care about as a company. And you're building the things, you're involved in them. So you have a unique point of view. So I think it's getting people comfortable to share that, and them feeling like they have the permission to go out and social and do that. That's a really big challenge. And you can have all the guidelines you want for people, and you can have everything, and there's still just like that level of uncomfortness from folks.
Yeah, and it can be a scary place. And I think you're right. It's about building the confidence and the competence. So, hi, Anita, you're online too. And thank you, Ryan. He shared
Yeah.
the Edelman study. That was very efficient of you. So, yes, that's the latest one from Edelman and LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Oh, there's so many things I've written down. In fact, I've written something here and I can't read my writing. Oh, yeah, overcoming some of that time
Yeah.
thing, I reckon, I've actually got to do this all the time. And I think it's really important to be upfront with people, isn't it? And say, look, there is a commitment here. We will invest in you, but I'm not going to lie, you're going to need to invest some time in to try and mitigate some of that, because you'll get a fallout otherwise if everybody's all excited and then they realize it's like not working. So
Yeah, you're right. And time is the hardest thing. You can't really, so I think it's what habits or what best practices can you share with an individual? So can you give 10 minutes a day just to go out and social and engage and start there?
yeah.
Can you start giving a couple hours a week to, like, I think that or once a month, can you do a blog or a live or some podcast? Like, I think that there's little baby steps you start with folks, and not
Yeah.
everyone's gonna be all into it, right? You have to be able to understand there's gonna be fall off. There's gonna be priorities are gonna change and shift for people, personal or professional, and you have to be okay with that. And I think as long as you sort of are able to pivot, I think it's just an important part of it all is just to go with the flow, and realize that not everything's going to probably roll out the exact way you started in the strategy.
Yeah, I'm almost wondering if there's like levels, isn't there, of SMEs? And you could have like a commitment matrix. It's like, can you commit to a live every quarter or a live every month? Or,
Right. And
almost like an SLA agreement you could have a little bit, couldn't you?
yeah, I think that's interesting to talk about. And we do sort of, there are some programs where we're looking at those types of things. Are you asked to be a speaker or at an event, an industry event? Are you, what's your what is the commitment you can give, and are you willing to be a part of? Now, it does take a team or some people to help find those opportunities for folks, whether it's speaking or drafting a thing, because we want to make sure that a lot of the stuff is, if it needs to be on par with the messaging. But yeah, I agree. I think you'll find that people. I mean, I find that people are really interested in being a social, and they find the value. Again, it's just around the commitment that they can give to see, and they have to. It's a long play. Again, you're not going to see immediate follower growth. You're not going to go, most likely go viral, if you will, and like the first thing you do, or ever maybe. But you got to be okay with that.
Yeah, expectation setting.
Mm-hmm.
Julia said, I love the statement. We don't want this to be all about the brand. Yeah. And actually, I think a lot of brands need to be comfortable with that statement. I think there's a point, isn't there, where a brand has to go, do you know what? This isn't about what we say. It's about actually highlighting what our
Right.
experts say.
Yeah, and as a brand, you have so many other things out there that you're saying, right? You have, whether it's on social or off social, now you don't want to be putting effort into things that are kind of counterintuitive to what the brand is saying. But this isn't another like marketing channel in a lot of ways. It's building that thought leadership. And when I say thought leadership, it's really at the highest level of awareness and market relevance around topics, not about the products or solutions per se. Now, I think those can kind of get pulled along through the journey as someone might want to double click into a thing. But yeah, you don't start with that.
No. Right. I'm going to move on to the success,
Yeah.
because you talked about challenges. So
Mm-hmm.
everyone asks this, how do you measure the ROI? How do you communicate it back to leadership that this is actually working? So what's your...
Yeah, I think, what we do sometimes is on the individual level, like if we're looking at the SMEs, how we track success is their follower growth. Are they kind of posting more often? What's their cadence? Like, how are they becoming more active on the platforms? When they are becoming more active and talking about topics that are related to IBM, what's the engagement look like on those posts? So I think that is us investing in the individual and sort of building their brand, their personal brand. And that also can look like, are they getting asked to be on, a speaker at different things, or are they writing for, third-party publications, that all that kind of is compassed together, and that takes a lot of sometimes manual tracking, or we do have some platform partners that will help us kind of track that. And then as far as benefiting the brand, I think that there's ways that we can showcase, like, what is the reach that we're getting when they talk about those messages across social. So if they are talking about a topic that we care about, let's just use cloud, for example, and when they talk about that, is that reaching new audiences? So I think it's just like, are we penetrating and building our brand lift in other ways, in other segments that we can't reach through our own channels?
Yeah.
So I think those are sort of the brand side and the personal side that we sort of couple together and say, this is an investment that we're making. And we sometimes compare that to what's going out on our own channels. And those, at times, the stuff that's coming in from the IBMer or an employee is sometimes outperforms that. So if we can kind of benchmark that against what's going out, maybe from an own channel or what's going out on different platforms, like, we can kind of showcase really easy that this is a good investment of our time to continue to build these people up.
Yeah, and we've seen that as well. When for the employee advocacy work that we do, we see that employee curated posts often get up to like 30 times more engagements per share. So because what employees want to share and what they want to create resonates with other employees who want to share it. You know what I mean? So it just, the effect is compounded by the fact of all these different factors that are involved. It just makes it even more successful. So it's, I see that too. There was another question I was going to ask. What's up with that? I think I was a bit poorly earlier this week, and I think I've got brain fog. Sorry, Ryan. Yeah. You keep coming back to topics, which I think you've mentioned that over and over. I don't want to skim over that because it sounds like that's quite a key part of your influencer approach. I know we're already halfway through and I've got so much more to ask, but I did want to center in on that. I've highlighted it because you keep coming back to that. You do social listening around topics. You have your SMEs around topics. You kind of measure the share of voice around topics.
Yep.
How do you pick the topics? How do you?
The topics for us are directly aligned to our marketing campaigns. Mm-hmm. So as an organization, across marketing, sales, communications, all of them, we as a company are pretty focused on a handful of topics. Now, as the scale of our company, there are a lot of things that we can talk about, right? And there wouldn't be enough. That would be like pretty rude to our followers on social just to be kind of talking about these things that sort of are not a priority for the company. So we definitely prioritize what's good for the business with how we want to show up with our SMEs on social. So those are really integrated intentionally, that because again, we have to support the business in a lot of ways, and that is, and in our eyes, it's an awareness play. It's at top of the funnel. It is getting more eyeballs, getting more interest, getting more engagement on these topical topics, these topical things. So it's really integrated across. So we're not out there just sort of like picking at random. Now we might do some social listening that's not related to the topics and see something trending, or we know that there's Cybersecurity Month coming up in October. There's some of these like things that you plan for because it's on the calendar, and then there's things that happen, just happen normally throughout the course of a day or the month, and that could be a crisis, it could be not. So we kind of have to be agile when we listen to things too, and say, okay, do we have people that talk about this at IBM? Can we have someone speak on that? So there's definitely a lot of ways that we kind of think about topics.
I like that, because so what you're kind of saying then is there's like almost like a 3-tier, which is you've got your planned stuff, which is happening, your months, your events, that kind of thing. Then you've got your core topics that are important to business growth that everybody's aligned around, sales, marketing, the whole business is aligned around. And then you've got agile, right? So you're socially listening and you're saying, hold on, something's bubbling up here. You could rope in one of your SMEs to have an opinion about that, or to share it, or keep keeps you
exactly.
relevant in the market space in front of audiences.
Yes, and you have to, yep, exactly, I love that.
Yeah, brilliant. Right, we've got a question here. As a non-marketer and being new to the IT industry, is there a best way to mix the brand versus non-brand content, or how do you make it more relevant to your connections? I guess this is a balance between the SME's expertise and the brand
Yeah,
expectation.
I think I've seen, I think there's like this 80-20 rule that we talk a lot. So I honestly believe that 80% of the content that's being created by a subject matter expert, whether that's off on their own or sometimes within a campaign of ours or a strategy, that's non-branded. And then 20% is sort of the branded stuff where they might reshare something, a news announcement, or they might reshare a blog and kind of give their point of view above that in as a LinkedIn post or something. Like, I worked on this thing at IBM. This is what it does. I'm proud of it. That sort of stuff. I think the non-branded items are really important to build authenticity of the individual. And what we've seen generate a lot of engagement on social is when that person, the SME, can bring like what they're passionate about outside of work and tie it to what they're doing at work.
Yeah.
We had this, a really great example from this summer. We had a program running this summer with some of our interns that were doing some work around this, and they had a gentleman, an IBMer, who loves taking photographs, and he also works on AI. And so he was doing a few social posts around how these two in his life sort of connected, and those things were just like really, they just, while they're not talking about the brand, right, but they're building his personal brand around the topics of AI, and he's doing it in an interesting way on social by bringing photography into it. So I think it all kind of worked, and those things are really important. So and one day down the line, once he gains these followers and topical authority on AI, for example, then we can start talking about the things he's actually building at IBM. And I think that just sort of, that's again the long play. It's not something that happens like overnight.
I think that's so important. And I've got a couple of other examples. I always remember working with a guy at SAP, or two actually at SAP. One was, he was fanatical about sport, and he used to love analytics and how sport, sort of worked with that. There's another guy who used to love old albums. Anyone, before we had like Apple and Amazon Music, used to have like record players. And he used to love the lyrics of old records and try and tie those back to business situations, which is amazing,
there's like that's a lot of creativity, right?
Yeah.
And that's that can be an important part of this whole process, is tapping into that. It's there. I think that there's this interesting of like art and science when it comes to technology and how it all mixed together, and it's there. You just got to sort of mine for it a little bit.
Yeah, you've got to try and find it, because they won't find it themselves. I've got another question. What would you say to companies that are unsure about getting started on social? How can they dip their toe?
What do you think about that, Sarah?
Well, I'm the big advocate of social. It depends. They're probably on social as a brand, but they're probably a little bit nervous about getting employees on social. Ryan, it's like the tables are turned. Hold on a minute. What are you asking me a question?
I mean, I know you have a lot of experience in this too. And yeah, if we're talking about sort of unleashing and giving permission to your employees, I think starting is, there's got to be some guidelines and expectations like that you create as a company. And those can be really kind of straightforward and obvious for a lot of people, but it just gives you that ability. And those are things like, don't be a jerk on social, and don't engage with this certain types of things, and don't share proprietary information. Like, there's some obvious things. I think starting there, if you're interested in giving permission to employees, because that's a good place for you to reference, because there's going to be a lot of questions, especially as you get started, of what can I say? And so I think that's really important. And then I think it's also creating probably some resources, whether that's through a partnership with like Tribal Impact, or you can do it in-house too, of what are some best practices on these platforms when your employees want to show up. And so, and that can be sponsored by the brand in a lot of ways, of, things you can do for profile optimization, connecting with your peers. I think there's a lot of different things you can do as getting started, but it's those guidelines I think is a really great part. And we talk about this the whole time, is like setting expectations. Like we don't expect everyone to be on social. You don't have to identify as an employee of our company on social media, nor do we expect you to. But if you do, these are the things you need to consider, because you do represent the brand as an ambassador if you are on social, whether you expect that or not. Like that's just a reality.
Yeah. I think you only have to search for TikTok got me fired in Google and you'll see lots of examples. This is for me. I've just written an article actually for Forbes about this, which, the TikTok video went viral. Now what? And I think this is what makes a lot of leaders nervous about activating employees on social, because they may not be on LinkedIn in a professional capacity, but they will be on other platforms. Now, we're taking so much time up, but I did want to talk about platforms actually, because a lot of employees will be on TikTok, Instagram for their own choice, but they're still representing the brand. So can you talk to me a bit about, in the context of influencer marketing at IBM, which platforms do you encourage or prioritize? Because certainly in the US, you've got Reddit, which is also over here, but quite a big platform in the IT.
Yeah, I think if we're encouraging individuals to be active on social and we're putting them part of our campaigns and like our strategy and programs, and as I mentioned, we want them to sort of be focused, like start small. If you don't know where to like jump in, we don't expect you to have all the platforms and be on all of them. And they all have different nuance, right? They all have different nuances and different algorithms, and don't expect you to learn that. But if, as an employee, whether or not you identify as an employee on TikTok, for example, people can obviously, if you're using your name and likeness, you can probably jump over to LinkedIn and find where you work, because you probably have a LinkedIn profile. So I think what we do, as a B2B company, I think we prioritize LinkedIn and Twitter. Now we do a lot of activations with our employees on platforms like TikTok and Instagram, because I think there is a lot of opportunity there for people to find like-minded individuals. It's not all about the dancing and but at the end of the day, like your C-level individuals where a B2B company might be targeting might not be making a purchasing decision on TikTok, but they might be spending time there on their weekends, and they might be engaging with the algorithm in a way that shows tech-related content. So I do think that there's value in showing up, but you have to have the resources for individuals if there's concern there. We can't like put our head in the sand and expect that, no one on the company is going to be on these platforms besides the ones that we sort of endorse. That's just not the reality. So it comes back to those guidelines of like, don't be silly when you show up on social, as you always are representing the brand. And here are some best practices for those platforms, and this is how you can grow your follower. This is how you can, I'm seeing people doing stuff and being creative on TikTok and putting that on LinkedIn. I'm sure we all see that. And, we see it, a couple of weeks later, maybe show up on Instagram. And so I do think that we know people are on the platforms, whether it's professional, personal, mixture of both. So you just got to kind of set them up for success by having the right resources and the right conversation. And, Reddit's is a great platform too. There's a lot of great conversations happening on that, but it is a nervous place for a lot of brands to go, because, there's a lot of people hidden behind the screen. So you have to sort of take that risk and reward and figure out what's worth it for the brand. We might not invest a lot of time there, but you might invest social listening, because there might be trends happening within those sub-communities, subreddits, that you as a brand can create content around or have a conversation around, because it's happening there on Reddit. It doesn't mean it's not happening anywhere else. So you can kind of take that as inspiration, or to kind of inform your strategy as an individual or as a brand.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I remember for a customer, we did a bit of social listening and we were shocked, actually. We expected the conversations to be happening over Twitter, but they weren't. They were all happening in forums on sub-communities on Reddit. So I think it really is where the people are is where you should lead to. So such great insights, I think, Ryan, about, how you prioritize channels. Chris actually mentioned, Chris Kim a couple of weeks ago, he mentioned your employees are publishers now, whether they're doing photos on the weekend on Instagram, you might as well, and I think touching on the point you've just said, you might as well enable them to be successful on those platforms, because
Right.
that helps the good of the brand at the end of the day.
Yeah. You can't look the other way. I think it's just inevitable that people are there. And so it's just, how do you want to support them?
Yeah, I love it. Right, we're closing up. So if anyone's got any questions, pop them in. But I've got 2 more questions for you. You touched a bit on what data you put behind the program. You touched a little bit on the personal side, and then you said about reach. But what are the sort of metrics? I mean, I know you guys work with Analytica as well, and the network maps, which I know if Anita's still on, she absolutely loves and was talking about last week. But that's amazing because you can monitor where you're moving in the conversation, if you're on the periphery or moving to the center. But are there any other data points that you sort of...
Yeah, I think if we're looking at how we can build our brand and the business, if it's relevant for a campaign, we sometimes will look at traffic that might drive to a relevant IBM.com page. So there is some of that campaign style metrics, or are those engaged visitors? Are those visitors new to IBM.com, for example? So I think that's really important for the business at the very high level of showcasing, and you mentioned too, sometimes if you're comparing a branded post versus a SME post, more times the SME post is generating a little bit more conversation. And so that, can we showcase that the next step people are taking is actually a click from social, which we know is hard to do, and it's not always a priority for us. Just think about your own personal habits on social. Very rarely are you clicking off of the platform. But when you do, we want to be able to showcase that to the business, that we're driving relevant traffic.
Yeah, I love it. Traffic, clicks. Yeah. Right, final question for you. Anita is still here. Hello, Anita. I know there's a bit of a delay. What can brands do to make it easier for more subject matter experts to come forward and say, do you know what, now I'm seeing what's involved. How can you make it easier so they raise their hand?
Yeah, I think it's kind of showcasing some use cases or some wins that people have had, from whether it's internally or externally, of, I got started on social and this is what I saw, and that especially goes for your sales organization too. If people are I generated these kind of leads, or I had this conversation with a prospect because of XYZ, I'm active on social. I think those are anecdotes that I think really help kind of allow people to see the bigger picture of how this can impact them at their job and them personally. Especially if they get asked to be on a podcast or interviewed somewhere, it just kind of ripple effect. And I think it just comes back down to setting the expectations of, if you want to potentially see yourself as a subject matter expert and thought leader on this topic, then these are the sort of things you need to do from a personal level, and that's time commitment, and that's content creation, and that's engagement. And if you can do all those things, then you should raise your hand, and we'll invest time in you through resources. I think those are ways just to get people kind of to see the proof in the pudding from other people, their peers. And I've seen this even in our external partnerships with influencers, where we've been working with people for years, and I've seen their follower growth just skyrocket. And it's really about consistency and engagement and just putting yourself out there, which can be a scary thing for a lot of people. But I think you just have to sort of showcase that over time for people, and they'll raise their hand, they'll be interested in doing it. But I think you really benefit everybody if you can be upfront at the beginning and say what you expect for time commitment and content creation and all the things, because it doesn't do anyone justice if you kind of gloss over that part, and then weeks go by and they're like, oh man, I can't do this, or they ghost you or whatever, and you're kind of what happened? Yeah,
what just happened? Yeah, commitment matrix. I've got an idea there, Ryan. That is, we went way over time, but honestly, it was a brilliant conversation. The things that sort of bubble up for me are you've got to be in this for the long term. This is a strategic thing. This is a relationship play, not just with external influencers, but with how you nurture and build internal influencers, employee influencers. So that one I've got. The other one was how you bake and embed yourself into all the existing processes that are there. You don't run this as a bit of a sideline. This is baked into the campaigns, the strategic topics for the company. All of that is very loud and clear. And also you're quite sophisticated at IBM, and that you've been doing this for a while, so this is not a quick thing, but you're actually now starting to scale this up within the company and bringing almost like a pipeline of employee influencers, which I quite like. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Sarah, for the great conversation and great questions, to you and Ryan Humphreys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Really a pleasure. And thanks everyone for joining and all the brilliant questions that you put forward. So really good. And don't worry, Sandy, you can watch the recording after. So I know you were a bit late, but thank you, everyone. All right, take good care. Bye, Ryan. Thank you. Bye-bye.